They've got quite a bit on the line here. They're both undefeated. Check that. Alabama has a loss. I don't know why I said that. They're both the top of the SEC West, and quite frankly, both the top of the SEC, and they are playing for basically what would be their spot in the college football playoff. Now, the college football playoff rankings got released yesterday. So this is going to be a highly fascinating look at both of these schools, where they stand. We're going to break down the whole thing. Both Alabama and LSU find themselves in the top 4. And I'm okay with all of that. It really, really works out pretty well. Both of those two schools being in the top 4, it makes the drama of this coming Saturday that much higher. Alabama, LSU, games for the ages. Nick Saban's been in this rivalry for a decade, and I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to try and find some Nick Saban highlights, get it to the people so we can get, just an inside look of what Coach Saban is thinking. And you know what? I never realized how many cliches Nick Saban throws out into the world. He just throws cliches out into the ethosphere. And I hate sports cliches. They are the worst. Like, cliches are bad. In broadcasting, in radio, you're not supposed to use cliches. They tell us this all the time. Do not use cliches. You can't help it. You're always going to let a few slip. That's fine. Where I have a problem with cliches is when they're just used so constantly and without thinking. And sports cliches are quite possibly, the biggest violators of cliches. Like, sports cliches are the worst. And they were asking Nick Saban, how this game, like what this game's weight means to the season. And if he's thought about it at all, and if 10 years into this rivalry, if this game has any extra weight. And Nick Saban ran out we're going to play this game one game at a time. We're going to take the games one game at a time. This is the next game. And this upset me. This upsets me on a deeply personal level, because what are you, playing the games 3 games at a time, just different from everybody else? Like, no, we're taking the games 5 games at a time. We're going to try and see if we can win 3 weeks from now today. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Why do you say that? Of course you're taking it 1 game at a time. So is everybody else. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, Hot News Talk Radio. Give us a search. We are the first thing that comes up. You report, the world decides. Hot News Talk Radio. This is Clutch with Keon Rose. And it's another day here in partly cloudy Nooga, Tennessee. I am really looking forward to this rivalry. I also have some NFL to talk about today. Obviously, the big news out of Nashville, Ken Wisenhunt is fired. He was fired yesterday. During my show yesterday, it was the official news that Ken Wisenhunt was no longer the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. And there is a contingency of people who believe that Ken Wisenhunt didn't have a fair chance to win, and that the team wasn't very good, and that the team's very cheap. And I was talking to Mr. Judd about that earlier, and he believes this, and I agree to a certain extent. But Ken Wisenhunt, and I heard the number being tossed around. Ken Wisenhunt is 1-20 in games in which he has not had 8 months to prepare for them. He wins the opening games of the season, and then he doesn't win any more games. And I know that the team is stingy, and I know that the team is cheap, but you know what? The AFC South is dreadful. It's dreadful. And if you want an opportunity to make the playoffs, and despite the fact that the Titans are 1-6, they do still have a very good chance to make the playoffs, because the AFC South is that bad. It is terrible. You've got in it the Colts, who are terrible, the Jaguars, who are terrible, the Texans, who are worse, and the Titans. And all of us together just in one bag of mediocrity. And the way the NFL rules work, if you win your division, you go to the playoffs. Plain and simple. So you could have a worse record than some other teams in the league. You'll be making the playoffs, and they'll be sitting at home watching you on the couch, like the rest of us. And if you're Tennessee, you're looking at Ken Whisenhunt going, okay, this guy might not win another game this season. At least let's try and get another coach here and see if we can scare 2 or 3 more wins out of the season, because you've got a shot. Like, legitimately, 7-9 might get you into the playoffs. 6-10 could probably get you into the playoffs in this division. It's bad. Andrew Luck looks terrible. Like, I think everyone just kind of crowned the Colts as the team that they're going to win the division. The Colts feast on teams that are terrible. They have been, over the last 2 or 3 years, pretty average against quality teams. And then against teams that are terrible, they win a lot of games against. And you know what? Because the AFC South is their division, they play a lot more terrible teams than most. And that's not their fault. You beat the teams in front of you. But this year, they're not doing it. And as a result, the entire division looks bad. It looks like one giant race to the bottom. It looks like one enormous race to the bottom. So we'll have some more updates on that as the week goes on. The interim coach is offensive coordinator Mike Mularkey. He's going to be the interim head coach of the Tennessee Titans for the remainder of the season. And, you know, Mularkey's pretty solid, and I know that a lot of the players like him a lot. So we'll see. I'm going to try and get some audio from the press conference, which is unfortunately at the back end of this show. So I won't have the audio today. We'll just have to catch up on that tomorrow. But I'm very, very, very interested in seeing where the Titans go from here and if they actually can make the playoffs. Like, it's not impossible. Is that not silly? It's still in the realm of reality that halfway through the season, a 1-win football team can actually make the playoffs. They are 1.5 games back from the top of the division. That's crazy. That's crazy. And I can't think of another time where that really has happened, where all 4 teams, where the race for the playoffs was this wide open because of sheer dreadfulness. Last year, the NFC South is a pretty good example. The Panthers ended up being the team that got in, and the Panthers were what, 8-7-1. Like, that was a bad team. It's a bad team. 8 wins, 7 losses, and a tie. I mean, that was a bad division. The Saints were bad. The Falcons were bad. The Panthers were bad. The Buccaneers were bad. This year, honestly, and this just shows you how up and down the league is. This year, the NFC South is probably one of the tougher divisions. Like, the Buccaneers are still bad, but you see them growing all the time. Jameis Winston looks like a better and better quarterback every week. The Falcons are probably the best team in the division, despite the fact that they're not the ones who are actually undefeated. The Panthers are undefeated, and as long as the Saints have Drew Brees, they're always going to be in it. Drew Brees threw 7 touchdowns last week. He is the 8th person to do so. He is the 8th person to throw 7 touchdowns. That is crazy. So as long as that continues to be a thing, the NFC South is on the up and up, despite one year last year where they looked like the worst division in football, and it looked like they would be the worst division in football for a very long time. Now they're one of the best ones, and they've been replaced by the AFC South. Those Titans can still make the playoffs. I can't believe it. And I don't know, because teams get this boost from switching coaches. It's a weird thing that happens. It happened to the Dolphins. You know, they fired Joe Philbin, and shoot, I don't even remember what the name of their coach is right now. But he's an angry guy, and he's very passionate and very fired up, and he's like, this team is going to play hard and they're going to grind, and I'm going to act like a drill sergeant. That's my routine, and it's worked. Like, they lost to the Patriots pretty badly, but otherwise, this team has looked like a tough football team, which is one of the complaints that about them before, that they didn't look very tough. They were soft. They're not soft right now. I'll tell you that. So you switch coaches, And some teams get this boost from that. And I feel like you could probably ride a little bit of that boost to the playoffs. You could actually get to the playoffs this year. And I don't know how long the Colts are going to keep stumbling around, because I just think that Andrew Luck is ultimately too talented and the rest of the AFC South is ultimately too bad to really, really catch the Colts. Like, I think the Colts are going to play some games against the Jaguars, going to play some games against the Texans, and kind of get on top of this thing. But you've got an opportunity here, if you're Tennessee, to walk away. You can't lose games like they did last week to the Texans, where, and I was listening to the game on the radio, you can't lose games where you're just giving the ball away over and over and over again. And the consistency here in Tennessee, it's the quarterback position is always inconsistent. So we'll see how well Mariota does. Mariota is the kind of guy, he's very smart, he's very intelligent, he's also very athletic, and he was playing very well. Okay, I liked his progression throughout the season, even though the team wasn't winning any football games prior to him spraining his MCL. But one thing to note about them, okay, is one thing to really note about them, like I'm dead serious, is I think that this quarterback carousel, coaching carousel thing that they do, that the Titans do, is why they'll ultimately be a bad team. Like, you have to find a guy that's, you know what, this guy is our coach through thick and thin, and you have to stick with him through the whole contract. And I understand a lot of people wanted Wisenhunt gone. Like, there's a guy that I talk to on Twitter all the time, and you can follow me on Twitter at SportsCloud. His username was Fire Wisenhunt. He's a Titans fan. He's a huge Titans fan. Look, I get it. But Ken Wisenhunt wasn't the only thing wrong with this team. But you're going to use this head coaching change bump to try and see if you can make the playoffs. You're not going to fix what's wrong with this team ultimately, which is everything. That the defense, especially the secondary, is anemic. The running game is horrendous. The passing game, despite the fact that they went out to try and get some receivers, doesn't look any good. And you know, I think part of it was, yes, some blame does lie at the feet of Ken Wisenhunt. He does some weird head-scratching things in games, but like, some of these games were just lopsided, like just a lack of talent. There's nothing that your coach is going to be able to do when you lack that much talent. So yeah, you're gonna take Mariota and try and see if he can help you turn this thing around. But Mariota doesn't have a ton of protection. The running game, like I said before, doesn't exist. Like, it just doesn't work very well. Okay, you can't keep relying on Bishop Sankey. Like, it's to a degree it could work, but not always. It's a very strange thing that you see in Tennessee, that a team is that consistently untalented for that long. The Tennessee is always going to have talent in specific spots, and then never be a well-rounded team. You've got to have a general manager and a coach stick around long enough to have that one vision. Again, you see the thing that makes the Steelers successful and the Patriots successful: the continuity of your head coach and your quarterback. You can't keep changing these guys around. Okay, Mariota did get injured, so we're not necessarily talking about that. But I remember when there was a time we thought that Mettenberger was the guy. And he was very well liked, and he's an SEC guy, an LSU guy, in fact. Very well liked Mettenberger, and he's gotten a longer leash than I think he probably deserves, because I don't think he's that good. He's just not seeing the field. Zach Mettenberger is seeing the field up until the red zone. Then 20 yards away from the end zone, he might as well be playing rugby. It's not the same game, what he's looking at. And I don't even know what to tell you there. But we are talking college football coming up around the corner, Alabama, LSU. But more importantly, the College Football Playoff Committee released their rankings. And you know what? It's pretty controversial. There's some things in there that I definitely agree with. There's some things that I definitely disagree with. And, oh, look, more music to make some of you happy, more music to make some of you puke. If you like LSU, you're dancing. If you don't like the Tigers, I am sorry. This is Alabama LSU Week here on Clutch with Keon Rose. And right around the corner, we're going to be talking about Alabama and LSU, their place in the college football playoff rankings. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let us know on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. We're streaming live. You can see my face as I try and talk over the obnoxious sound of Louisiana State. Man, one of these days I'm just going to play a Longhorn fight song here just to make everyone upset because nobody cares about the Big 12. One of these days. This is AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose, and we'll be back.
This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
President Obama makes Jimmy Carter look like Napoleon Bonaparte. We have a president that leads from behind, and when America doesn't lead, bad things happen.
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
Tired of insurance companies? Tired of doctors that won't spend time with you? Do something different. Leave the sick care model of medicine and come to Dr. Danielle Mitchell, the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health, where we're interested in long-term health solutions, not the quick fixes. Come see me, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, at the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health. I'm all about the long-term healthcare solutions and doing what's best. On the web, you can find me at ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. That's ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. Or call us at 875-1005, 875-1005, or find us on social media, Facebook, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, or the ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. Let's go, ya!
Are you tired of working in corporate America, or have you recently lost your job and would like to consider owning your own business? If you are, please call me, as I can help you look at franchises or business opportunities that fit you, the economy that we're in, and the type of businesses that are right in the greater Chattanooga area. After I help my clients find the right opportunity, I also help them find the best way to finance the business, including paying yourself through the startup phase. If you would like to learn more about opportunities that may be right for you, please call me for a free assessment. My name is Bruce Krebs at the Entrepreneur Source. Phone number is 423-875-5621.
That smells so good. Smells like a big Italian dinner. But you're going to walk out with two. Buy one hot pizza, get a one for free. 2 pizzas. You got the 2 for the price of 1 at Raphael's Italian Restaurant and Pizzeria. My favorite Italian restaurant of all the time. Now, I'm living in Hicks, and I go to Raphael's right down the street in Hicks and Pike, right near Highland Plaza. You're in Saudy Daisy? At Raphael's Italian Restaurant and Pizzeria in Saudy Daisy. Just next to Saudy Daisy Church of God. Hey, you're on Signal Mountain, there's a Raphael's Italian Restaurant and a Pizzeria. It's right on the main drag. You're going to love the pasta, the pizza. Buy one hot pizza, get a one for free. 2 pizzas. You got the 2 for the price of 1 at Raphael's Italian Restaurant and Pizzeria. Tastes so good. Bring the whole family. Come on, Raphael's Italian Restaurant and Pizzeria. Mangia. Salute.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, host of The Costa Report, every Sunday at 9 a.m. Mark your calendars right now, because my guest this week is none other than one of the leading GOP presidential contenders, neurosurgeon Dr. Ben Carson. Don't miss a revealing conversation with candidate Ben Carson this Sunday at 9 a.m. on The Costa Report, right here on AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Yes, that is the sound of Alabama Crimson Tide football in this Alabama LSU week, and it is the game of the week. It is, hands down. It's not even up for discussion. It's not up for arguing of any kind. The college football playoff ranking came out last night, and it settles it. Both Alabama and LSU are in the top 4, and after next week's rankings, one of those teams won't be. One of those teams will not be in the top 4. Okay, because then you're going to have either Alabama as a 2-loss team or LSU as a 1-loss team. The reason why Alabama gets to be in the top 4, despite being a 1-loss team, of course, is part of it is their strength of schedule, which they are 4th in the nation. And the other part of it is the quality of their loss. Their one loss was to Ole Miss at home. It was a 43-37 loss. And the committee is trying to this year. This is what it looks like from just the way that they have ranked these teams. They're trying to look at quality of victories, quality of schedule. They're trying to go deep inside the schedule and find who has a strong team and who doesn't. And we have some evidence of that from college football committee chair Jeff Long. He talked a little bit about it on ESPN last night. He was being interviewed by Merrill Hodge, and this is what he had to say.
You know, again, these teams, TCU and Baylor in particular, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma to a lesser degree, but they have their strength of schedule in front of them. So, as you know, we rank to this point in time, and those teams just haven't played their strong teams yet. So we will see how they stack up as we get closer to the end of the season. So TCU and Baylor, the two best schools in the Big 12, are ranked. Baylor's ranked 6th. And TCU is ranked 8th. Baylor is 7-0. TCU is 8-0. Baylor has a strength of schedule ranking of 109, so it's not good. And Baylor does. And TCU is not much better. They're ranked at 88. And I think they're being penalized just for the way that their strength of schedule has been thus far. It hasn't been very good. They've played a lot of teams inside the Big 12. Those teams are not very good. And they've played their out-of-conference opponents haven't been particularly strong either. And that's the reason why, being in the SEC, you're going to get the boost. Now, I think the problem with the SEC is that a lot of these teams beat each other up so badly that you end up with 1-loss, 2-loss teams that may be better than some undefeated teams, leapfrogging them, which was the case last year. Now, this is a different committee, and it appears that they are looking at the tape a whole lot more than they were previously. This is a question that Merrill Hodge asked of Jeff Long last night about the amount of tape that the committee is watching and how that has changed the way that they view the strength of a lot of teams.
What, Jeff, do you think is the most significant thing in terms of football judgment, people in the room wanting to watch the teams on tape as opposed to looking at their numbers? What was the most influential thing in football judgment?
If I understand your question, I think it's the balance of their team. You know, we have teams that are just one-sided offensive teams or one-sided really strong defensive teams. So that combination of offense and defense, and then, you know, how they've played offensively and defensively in those games. So sometimes that's probably the hardest thing to judge, is some teams that have very explosive offenses, but we haven't seen their defenses tested.
All right, Jeff.
So you have, in that situation, the committee is looking at what you do on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. You have to be a well-rounded team in this year's college football playoff. That's what they're looking for. You have to pass the eye test. You have to, and it's a very unscientific way to go about rating these things, but I don't know how else you do it. Because here's the thing. The committee is trying to do something that we never really tried to do before in college football, which is to account for the nuance in losses and account for the nuance in games. But it still feels highly subjective where you're looking. They are trying to account for the nuances that if you lost, but did you lose to a good opponent? And I think it's weird how this whole thing has turned out, because Baylor and TCU, Baylor is ranked 2 spots ahead of TCU. Baylor is 6th. TCU is 8th. All right. And the thing that's interesting to note is that TCU has the stronger strength of schedule. How are they behind Baylor? It's inconsistent. I think I understand what they're trying to do. And certainly TCU has had some games where it doesn't look like they're interested in playing defense at all. I think the Texas Tech game probably highlighted that more than anybody, that their defense really let them down and they escaped by the skin of their teeth. That game was way closer than it ever should have been. And I mean way closer. But Mr. Judd and I did our picks, and we were shocked that Texas Tech covered. Now, we were surprised. That game shouldn't have been close at all. Not because Texas Tech can't score, but they're just not very good. And you're TCU, and you're saying you deserve to be a school that can represent on the national stage in the college football playoff. Not with a game like Texas Tech, you don't. Not with that game. Because if you show up looking like that, that's an embarrassment to everybody. The committee, the fans, everybody. Nobody is going to stand there and try and look that stupid. We'd rather just let Texas Tech earn their way in. And as Jeff Long was saying before, the more difficult parts of their schedule are yet to come. TCU and Baylor start to see the stronger parts of their schedule coming up in a little bit. So the committee is weighting more heavily the strength of the schedule, which is why Clemson is number 1. And I didn't see that coming. I think Ohio State, they're the defending champs. To me, they're target number 1 until they lose the game. Then we figure out what to do with them then. I would have them number 1. That's just me. But number 1 is the Clemson Tigers. Now, the thing about Clemson's got 4 teams that they've beaten over 500. And that looks really, really good on that resume, including that victory over Notre Dame. And Notre Dame is ranked 5th. Notre Dame, 1 loss, ranked 5th, but that loss came to Clemson, who is number 1. So the committee is looking at who you've played. And even though you've lost, who did you lose to and how? Is that a quality loss? And that's where that nuance comes in. And this is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. We're talking about the college football playoff. The committee released their rankings last night, and everybody's in an uproar over it. Everybody's in an uproar over it, as they should be. Okay? As they should be, because there's a whole lot here to unpack, and probably not enough time to unpack all of it. The committee is trying to watch the tape. The committee is trying to see the X's and O's of how these games are being played and trying to use that to rank things. Now, if you are a Florida fan and you're looking at your number 10 spot and you're going, well, dang, the Gators have played really well. There's a reason why they're ranked 10th and not any higher than that. Part of it is that they're a surprise team. But they have a strong strength of schedule. They've lost to a quality opponent. They lost to LSU 35-28. LSU is ranked 2nd. I think Florida ought to be higher than 10 if you're going to go by that metric. I think that Alabama's 1 loss, ranked number 4. I think that's one thing that the committee definitely got right. That is correct. They're supposed to be there. Alabama has leveled every quality opponent that has been in front of them. They have beaten everybody, and in a lot of cases, very soundly. They have absolutely squashed them. And if you're going to be looking at LSU and Alabama this week, it's not the game to decide who's the real deal. Because LSU and Alabama, both of those schools are for real. Both of those schools are for real. They play the game very well. The quarterbacks are starting to play well. Coker for Alabama, Harris for LSU. Their running backs are amazing. Henry for Alabama, Fournette for LSU. I mean, these are two teams that look so much alike that it's actually, to me, it's unfortunate that Alabama lost to Ole Miss earlier this season, because if Alabama were to lose this game, the two losses, you'd have to drop them back further. In my opinion, I think the committee would be crazy not to. Even though it would be they would be a team with two quality losses. Do they drop back further than Baylor and TCU, who to this point haven't played a soul? They haven't played anybody. You know, and I know that a lot of people don't like Danny Cannell. He's an ESPN analyst. His show is well, he's an adjutant, okay? He's known for his SEC hate. He will come on and he will tell you, "Oh, I don't hate the SEC." And then he'll say things like he said yesterday, which is that the lesson that you should learn here, and this is what he said, is that you need to schedule strong out-of-conference opponents. Unless you're the SEC, then it doesn't matter. But of course it doesn't matter, because your in-conference opponents are incredibly difficult. Okay, you're Baylor and you're TCU and you're playing Iowa State and Texas and Kansas. Like, these are the teams that are consistently on your schedule, and they're terrible. And they're terrible. Kansas State, West Virginia is okay. These are the teams that the Big 12, that if you play just in conference in the Big 12, I mean, you don't deserve to be anywhere. In the SEC, you do. Especially if you're in the SEC West. The quality of your opponents that you're playing in conference are inherently higher. And Alabama's playing tough out-of-conference opponents also. So I don't get that. That doesn't make any sense to me. That we're just going to see the SEC hate again because you've got two SEC teams in it, even though last year, when the rankings first came out, there were two Big 12 teams in it. It was Baylor and TCU. They ended up getting bumped out near the end. Oh, and by the way, Ohio State was 16th when the rankings first came out. By the time it was all said and done, they were number one and they were the champs. So these things will work themselves out. Teams will start playing each other more and more, and we're going to have some teams catching losses that will start to define their season and start to define a little bit more what the heck it is that we are even looking at. Because right now we're trying to go with the vague eye test. That's all we've got. You can look at the statistics and you can look at the numbers, but those can be misleading on their own. The eye test itself is a little misleading, and you're trying to mash the two and meet somewhere in the middle. That is probably as accurate as we are ever going to get. I prefer this way better than the way we used to do it with the computers. I don't think a computer should decide who my national champion is. Just on the face of it, there's just going to be things that computationally don't work. Like, do you take into account injuries? And do you take into account rivalry games? Weird, strange, fluky things happen in rivalry games. I mean, the things that a human being would take into account, a computer can't take into account yet. But if we're going to change the committees this often, then it's like baseball. You've got the umpire back there calling strikes. Some umpires have a big strike zone. Some umpires have a small strike zone. And you just don't know until the guy's tested. And then you think that it's a ball. He thinks it's a strike. And then you know, okay, yeah, this guy is seeing the game a little differently than me. That the committee is seeing these games just a little bit differently than the rest of us. The things that they're rewarding and the things that they're not rewarding, there's more inconsistencies there. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. Clutch with Keon Rose here on AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Search Hot News Talk Radio. We are the first thing that comes up. You can stream us live as always and catch classic episodes. Never call them old. You can also find us on the TuneIn Radio app. Search it in the Apple Store or in the Google Play Store for those of you with Android mobile devices. And you can have Hot News Talk Radio wherever you go. Simply give us a search, press play, and follow. Don't forget to follow. That's the important part. Or you will fail to land the dismount on that one. It's more LSU music for you. Do you like it? I'm thinking of doing this every week. Just whatever game that I think the game of the week is, we're just going to do the fight song for those schools. Because it's fun. And because this is one of the things that makes college football and college sports in general really cool in a way that professional sports can't be, which is that you just have that school spirit seems to trump everything. And you've got fight songs, and you've got marching bands. You've got the color guard. High school sports and college sports offer you that, and it's really cool, especially if you get the opportunity to see it live. Highly recommended. Alabama, LSU week. This is Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
Give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
Are you tired of feeling like just another account number to your financial advisor? Try something refreshingly different. Call Edward Jones Financial Advisor Patrick Neal in Hickson at 870-7894. Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Social media, we're on that. Hot News Talk Radio on Facebook, at Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter. Download the TuneIn app and follow us anywhere at any time. AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
Welcome to this Alabama LSU flavored week of Clutch with Keon Rose. And by the way, if you are not a fan of either of these schools and you are being forced to listen to this, I'm sorry. I'm a Texas Longhorn fan. I have no dog in this fight. I just like good football. Tell me Alabama versus LSU this weekend is not going to be good football. Henry, Burnett, Harris. Come on. Tell me that you're not having fun with this. Because I am. Kirk Cousins of the Washington Redskins is having fun with this too.
You like that? You like that?
I do, Kirk. I do like that. Alabama, LSU. And they're in the top 4 in the college football playoff. Both of them. And you know what? A lot of people don't like that.
You like that? You like that?
But I do like that. I like that a lot. Okay? I like it a lot. I think that Alabama does deserve to be in the top 4. There's a lot of griping and complaining about, oh, look, it's the SEC bias again. It's rearing its ugly head. These are 2 of the 4 best teams in college football. America, just deal with it. Okay? Just deal with it. Okay? You can't dispute what LSU has done. Leonard Fournette, okay, is Mario with the super mushroom stomping all over Goombas. Okay? That's what it looks like when he plays football. He's not even running through people anymore. He's just stomping on Goombas. That's all that looks like. And I have never seen that before in my life. Okay, I've seen Adrian Peterson do some very crazy things. I've gone back. I watch old highlights. I watch old games. I've seen the things that Jim Brown did to people back in the day when he played for the Cleveland Browns. I've seen what O.J. Simpson did to people. And I mean on the football field, by the way. O.J. Simpson was a football player. It's easy to miss in all of his murdering was that he played football. I've seen what O.J. Simpson did to people on the football field. I should probably specify that there. What O.J. Simpson did to people off the football field is a different issue entirely, and he should be in jail for that. But for what he did to people on maybe for what he did on the football field too. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. That was some harsh stuff. And Leonard Fournette's a nice guy. It's weird. His off-the-field demeanor does not belie what terror awaits you when he's coming in your direction, which is he's a very large, very fast human. And when he's ready to get to the end zone and you are in his way, he is Mario with the supersized shroom and you're a Goomba. And that's about all she wrote. That's about all she wrote. Meanwhile, that offensive line for LSU and for Alabama, they're huge. They're huge. Okay? I mean, every aspect of this game is exciting. You want to see great defense? It's there. Do you want to see great offense? It's there. You want to look in the battle of the trenches, the defensive lines versus the offensive lines? It's there. It's there. There's nothing to not like about this game, and there's nothing to not like about both of these teams and the way that they've gone about handling themselves this season. Alabama bouncing back from that Ole Miss loss early in the season. I mean, that was the perfect time to lose. If you were going to lose early. Lose early and then make up for it later. And again, lose early into a quality opponent. I don't know that Ole Miss by the end of the season will qualify as a quality opponent. They do at the moment, but I mean, they've looked pretty rough since then. That win is starting to mean probably a little less and a little less with every passing week, but at the moment, it still qualifies as a quality opponent, and that's what the committee is ranking on. What's happened at this moment? I think ultimately a Baylor or a TCU will end up in the top 4. Right now, they're 6 and 8, respectively. I think a Florida's got a shot. They're ranked 10th. If Florida wins out, some other carnage happens in front, which, by the way, it will. And I think that that's what the college football playoff has done that makes this whole thing so exciting. You think the college football playoff is exciting? I don't. You know what I do think is exciting? All of the carnage leading up to the playoff. The 1-win teams, the 2-win teams, the quality of opponents, who's going up, who's trending down. Every week we will have new wreckage and carnage to talk about with regards to where teams fall in these rankings. An upset is going to ruin everything. And that's great for us. I mean, this is great entertainment. It gives us stuff to talk about for the next 6 days. Like now that we're at that stage in the season where they're going to be releasing these playoff rankings every week, there is going to be stuff to talk about 6 days out of the week. Like I want to talk about the Atlanta Hawks, and I don't have time really. Though I will have an Atlanta Hawks take right now. I will just give you your 45 seconds of Atlanta Hawks basketball for those of you who care about the beginning of the NBA season. All 4 of you. The Hawks last night beat the Heat. Jeff Teague played an incredibly balanced game. I like the way that the Hawks are continuing to play, continuing to space the floor. I remember that the game of the weekend that I gave you for the Hawks was Hawks versus Hornets, that they played a home and away against Charlotte. They played one game in Charlotte and then one game in Atlanta, and they won both of those games. And I think that that's the look of the Hawks this season, that they're starting to settle down a little bit, starting to find ways to generate points, especially that they're missing Damari Carroll. That was one of the huge questions. Are they going to be able to replace his production? The answer to that question is yes. Are they going to listen to Coach Budenholzer? The answer to that question for at least one play last night was no. The Hawks had a late game play that Coach Bud was drawing up, and hilariously, he's drawing up the play, and all the Hawks walk away. All of the Hawks walk away while he's drawing up the play. And the interesting thing is that he didn't stop to call them back. He continued drawing up the play. That's practicing what you teach right there. Coach Mike Budenholzer never giving up on the play, even when his team has. Sure, you want that to be a mentality that the team has on the court, not giving up on the play, but you've got to lead by example. Coach Bud drawing up the play even though nobody is listening. Everybody turned around and walked away simultaneously. It looked like a flash mob. Like the team just planned this, but they didn't. But they didn't, though. And it's the most bizarre thing. It's all over the internet. Just search it. If you go on Facebook, it's like one of the trending things on Facebook. It's trending. It's hilarious. It's Coach Bud just drawing on his dry erase board, like, here's the play, guys. And the guys have gone. And it wasn't even a moment where he looked up and went, guys, that didn't happen at all. He just continued drawing out that play. And despite the fact that nobody was there. And I tried to get audio of it because I wanted to know if the announcers picked up on it at all. And of course they did not. So I don't have the audio of the entire team walking away from the coach as the coach is coaching. There's an inherent level of disrespect there that I cannot even wrap my mind around. Like, this is the guy that's paid to lead you, and here he is trying to lead you, and you just walked out. You try doing that to your boss next time. Just see how that goes for you. He's talking to you. He's telling you, Bill, we need those TPS reports in. And while he's telling you this, just stand up in your cubicle and walk away mid-sentence. And don't even look back, because none of them looked back, like to even see, like, okay, is coach coming with us? Or nothing. Not one Hawk looked back. And it was everybody. It was Teague. It was Horford. Splitter stayed a little bit. Splitter stayed like one more second than everybody. And even he wandered away. And it was just odd. Okay? It was just odd. And that's your Hawks update. Team walks away from Coach Bud while Coach Bud is coaching. That's the takeaway of the game. Because they won. And it was not like in the most impressive fashion. It was just, here's a quality win for the Hawks again, as they try and see if we can top that 60 win mark from last season. Unlikely that they will, but they could. They could. But I want to spend more time here on Clutch with Keon Rose talking about the college football playoff rankings. I've got the 10 teams in front of me in the top 10. I think other things to note, Memphis is ranked 15th, even though Memphis is undefeated. Memphis has got a fairly low strength of schedule also, but Memphis plays in a smaller conference. So that makes sense. Is it possible for Memphis to jump up? It is. They're going to have to keep winning. Memphis is one of those schools. Alabama can afford a loss. Memphis can't. I think that's fairly obvious. It's just the margin of error for you if your schedule strength is weaker with this committee. You just can't. Some of you can't afford to lose. But, Temple gets knocked out. That was another game that I thought you should watch because of just how out of nowhere Temple came. Then Temple was undefeated, and then Notre Dame beat them. But Notre Dame's a quality opponent. Does Temple have any margin of error? Because they're outside of the top 15. They're in the 20s now. So it's just with these small schools, how does that work out? How do you balance that? How do you go, this team is strong, this team is weak, when they're both undefeated? And you just look at the strength of schedule. You look at the quality of those games. You try and see, are they well-rounded? Is the offense good? Is the defense good? And that's basically what Jeff Long, the college football committee playoff chair, was saying to Merrill Hodge on ESPN last night. Take a listen.
What, Jeff, do you think is the most significant thing in terms of football judgment, people in the room wanting to watch the teams on tape as opposed to looking at their numbers? What was the most influential thing in football judgment?
If I understand your question, I think it's the balance of the team. You know, we have teams that are just one-sided offensive teams or one-sided really strong defensive teams. So that combination of offense and defense, and then, you know, how they've played offensively and defensively in those games. So sometimes that's probably the hardest thing to judge, is some teams that have very explosive offenses, but we haven't seen their defenses tested.
All right, Jeff.
And that's why Clemson's number one. Clemson has shown offensively and defensively that they're capable on both sides of the football. And come on now, they are. And they've beaten quality opponents, 4 teams with records above 500 at the time that they beat them. And both of those teams still have above 500 records. All 4 of those teams, rather. And they're looking at losses, the quality of your losses. Florida loses on the road to LSU 35-28. Notre Dame loses on the road to Clemson 24-22. Alabama loses at home to Ole Miss 43-37. All of those losses are considered quality losses, and that's why all 3 of those teams are in the top 10, despite being one-loss teams. That Florida, of course, Florida can lose to an LSU. LSU is number 2. LSU's number 2. And it's going to be interesting to note, because if LSU loses a game, I don't know if they have a high margin of error either, because they're missing a game. They didn't get to play their first game of the season because of weather. Now, they likely would have won that game. It wasn't against a very tough opponent. And I'll look that up for you to see who that was. I don't recall, because, again, it wasn't a very tough opponent. But the game was rained out. There was lightning and there was thunder, and they ended up not playing that game at all. And so does LSU get penalized if they lose a game for having one less game than everybody? Like, we can assume LSU would have won that game. But should we? Do they just get a free game? I don't know if that's gonna come into play at all. But these teams are so close, and it feels in a lot of ways very neck and neck. It feels very neck and neck in a lot of ways. So I don't know where your deciding factor in all of that winds up being. And to open the season, they're supposed to play McNeese State, and that game got canceled. Does that get held against them? If it's close, does it get held against them? So this is Clutch with Keon Rose, AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. Make sure you check us out on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. If you check us out on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can interact with us. We love to hear from you. You can even say that we'd like that.
You like that? You like that?
That's never going to get old. Do you understand? Like, that is never not going to be funny. Kirk Cousins beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, walking past the DC media, the Washington DC media, and just letting us know what it is.
You like that? You like that?
We do like that, Kirk. We do like that. I like that. You know what else I like? I like good football. Alabama, LSU. This game is coming up this week, and so I have themed and I have flavored this show in an Alabama LSU fashion as we go through the carnage of the college football playoff. We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow with Bill Bender, Sporting News college football writer, as he joins us every Thursday here on Clutch with Keon Rose. You're listening to AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, and I will see you in 23 hours.
Media Network's coverage of the NFL. Hi, this is Jerry Recco. Join Kevin Ray, Danny White, and myself for all